Erdogan, right? And he's been selling Erdogan on this Greater Turania project. And Erdogan has been very receptive. And he tried to co-opt Turkey into their war on Ukraine, on Russia and Ukraine. They wanted to bring Turkey as a Western ally in the proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. They wanted Turkey to support the West in Ukraine. And the Turks did a little bit, but not, and that was thanks to Russian diplomacy, because the Russians made sure, even though Turkey is not really an ally of Russia, but at least they're not an enemy. So the Russians brought Turkey out of the Western alliance, and the Turks chose not to join the alliance against Russia. So they're kind of in a limbo, half-half. But they're not, the Brits are not going to stop trying. They brought Turkey into the project Syria. So, the Turks cultivated HTS together, and together with the Brits, they managed all these jihadi militaries and militias to overthrow Bashar al-Assad regime. And now,
using Turkic people, by the way.
Sorry?
Using the Turkic people, these
Yes, exactly. But the Russians know that this is coming from them in the future. If they let this stand, because the Russians are very vulnerable to these jihadi terrorist groups that the West cultivates in Dagestan, in Chechnya, in Kazakhstan and elsewhere. I mean, okay, Kazakhstan is not in Russia, but I mean, it's all along the soft underbelly of Russia, where they are at risk of being infiltrated by these terrorist groups. So if they consolidate their power in the Middle East, in Syria, and start gaining ground, well, then they're like, as they incubated them in Idlib to attack Syria, they can now incubate them better in Syria to eventually attack Iran and to attack ultimately Russia as well, and then China as well through Xinjiang. So I think there's no question that the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians are aware of all this, and that they need to counter it. Now, how dangerous is all this? I honestly don't know, but I feel that it has to be a bit less dangerous than Ukraine, because if it was, let's say, if that line of attack was more viable than Ukraine, then the West would have chosen that line of attack rather than Ukraine. But they didn't. They chose Ukraine. So this means that this is their plan B or C or something else. This is they're trying to stir the pot in Azerbaijan and Iran and Armenia and so forth, because they are running out of options. So they're playing a weaker card, I think. But we'll find out. This new escalation of hostilities between Russia and Azerbaijan and Iran. This is relatively new. So it'll take time for us to see where it's going exactly.